Today we're going to tell you about 10 amazing people with extremely high motivation to honour their irrational beliefs and become society's most isolated hermits. Number 10. Józef Stałinoga. Józef Stałinoga, also known as Fred, was an 86-year-old hermit when he left the world in October 2007. He was a Polish immigrant who spent almost half a century in a tent erected on Wolverhampton Ring Road in the West Midlands, England. Very little is known about Mr. Józef, but records suggest that before immigrating to the UK in the 1940s, he was a survivor of the Soviet invasion of Poland in 1939. One of Stałinoga's close friends recalls that after the war, Józef permanently settled in Wolverhampton with a job and a place to live, and eventually began his married life with an Austrian girl. His marriage lasted only a year, and later on, for some unknown reason, he left his job and became homeless. He opted out of society and started living in a tent pitched on central grass reservations of the town's inner ring road. Local authorities tolerated his presence as he was claustrophobic, and he became something of a local character. Fred was treated as a holy man by the Hindu and Sikh communities, with many people believing he lived a truly enlightened life. Number 9. Willard Kitchener MacDonald, the Hermit of Gully Lake. Number 9 on our list is Willard Kitchener MacDonald, who jumped out of a troop train in order to avoid service during the Second World War, probably sticking to his no-violence policy. He built a secluded hut by Gully Lake in the wilderness of Nova Scotia and stayed in it for nearly 60 years. Born in Somerville, Massachusetts, this 87-year-old hermit lived in true isolation with no use of radios, television or any kind of newspapers. He was rarely spotted in an outside world, and the apparent reason for him to leave the bushes was only to refill his much-needed supplies after a month's gap. In 1993, his tiny hovel was engulfed by forest fire, and somehow the local community convinced him to shift into his new cabin built by local authorities closer to the town. After moving in for a brief period, he felt disturbed and distracted and fled into the woods again, where his body was later discovered in 2004. Number 8. Agafia Lakova. You would definitely admire the courage of this Siberian hermit who rejected to leave her remote house even though the incoming debris from the launch of space rockets could fall on her directly. Agafia recently celebrated her 75th birthday and is the last survivor of the ancestry who successfully opted out of Stalin's Russia to live in the wilderness of Khakassia Republic in southern Siberia. Agafia is a homesick woman who lived most of her life without enjoying any modern-day comforts. In fact, she lived her life much like a peasant from the 18th century. Following living standards guided in ancient Bibles, with no access to running water or electricity, is even harder than one can imagine in the remote wilderness of Siberia. Despite Agafia's hermetic existence, she thankfully has 2 adorable pets, her cat, Little Drawing, and her dog, Tiger, to keep her company all the time. Number 7. Valerio Rossetti. Valerio Rossetti, also known as the Hermit of Griffith, was a lone ranger who built a home in the rocks. He was an Italian immigrant born to a poor family before migrating to Australia at the age of 16 or 17. Rossetti has done quite odd jobs, notably as a miner and as a gardener for the most part of his life. Feeling frustrated from his life and disappointed social behaviours, Rossetti took a long walk towards the outskirts of Griffith. Legend has it, when Valerio was out walking, he was caught in a sudden rainstorm and he took shelter in a nearby large rocky cave where he spent the night. The next day he looked into the cliff he spent the night in and the valley below with abundant wild food and water supplies available. He decided to stay forever. Over the next 25 years, with makeshift tools, he built a stone house, and believe it or not, the house included a fully functional kitchen with stone furniture, pathways, a chapel and terraced garden as well. He used to call his personal utopia Mia Sacra Collina, my sacred hill. In 1935, he went for a trip down to Italy to visit his brother and never returned back to his cave. The Hermit's Cave has become an important part of Griffith's history and is now preserved as a heritage-listed site. Number 6. Richard D. Pronica. It's hard to spend one night in the Alaskan wilderness, and the number 6 on our list spent 30 years of his life all alone in one of the toughest places to live. A man named Richard Dick Pronica opposed himself down in Alaskan icy wilds. Born in Iowa in 1916, Richard was a self-educated naturalist and former U.S. Navy carpenter. He constructed himself a log cabin on the edge of Upper Twin Lake. Dick's house was on the southern shore of the lake where the sun's rays usually hit the cabin only after months. The long season of darkness and relentless cold could prove to be a limit for a normal person, but it did not have much effect on Richard's nerves. Kronecker was an energetic and active man. He used to hike thousands of miles per year. He died in 2003, but he left the Twin Lakes in 1998 when he was 82 to move in with his brother in California. He donated his log cabin and most of his possessions to the National Park Service. Number 5. Manfred Gnadinger. It's astonishing to see a well-educated person with good family background choosing a weird hermit lifestyle for himself, right? Born in South Germany in 1936, Manfred Gnadinger moved to the small village of Camel on the Costa de Morte in Galicia in Spain and stayed there until his death in 2002. Manfred built himself a small concrete hut on a piece of land located near the ocean. The man was a true sculptor and had built a lot of sculptures from stones and rocks on the beach where he lived. His living area was only 13 meters squared without any running water or electricity. Gnadinger made a natural living by feeding himself with seafood and wild vegetables. He walked barefoot and dressed in just a loincloth. He kept his fitness with routine exercise, daily jogging and swimming far into the ocean. After the 2002 oil spill of the Prestige, which destroyed much of the beach and affected the ecosystem of the surrounding areas, Manfred became very sensitive to environmental issues and locked himself in his cabin. Later, a concerned local community member found him dead inside. Locals believe that the hermit had died from the shock and sadness of the spill. Number 4. Robert E. Harrell. Robert E. Harrell, famously known as the Fort Fisher Hermit, was an American man who chose to be a hermit at the age of 62 after a failed marriage and a string of unsuccessful and unsatisfying jobs. Harrell was admitted to a mental hospital by his in-laws and he apparently escaped the facility by making a key out of an old spoon. He was arrested by the police, but later on he set up a simple home in an abandoned World War II-era bunker near the rocks beside the Fort Fisher River. Living off the land for almost 17 years, he survived by mostly hunting down wild animals or fishing at sea. Occasionally, his supplies were also refilled by his visitors. Over the years, he became a legend in North Carolina because of his interesting life stories he used to tell to visitors. People used to make a trip to the area just to see the hermit and pay him to hear some of his stories. Harrell left this world in 1972. The official cause listed was death by heart attack, but many believed he was attacked by a brutal local gang and became the victim of a violent act. Number 3. David Glasheen. You've probably heard the idiom from rags to riches, but this hermit on our list just proved otherwise. David Glasheen, Australian millionaire, lost everything and ended up alone, shirtless on a deserted island. The sole resident of the far north Queensland's Restoration Island enjoyed the status of the most successful figures in the mining business, with a net worth of over $37 million. But fate had hit him hard when he lost all his money to a stock market share. Not only that, but his family fell apart, and the apparent reason was unsuccessful business ventures that also cost him huge fortunes. David couldn't handle it. It was all too tough for him. Devastated from his life and looking for escape, he eventually became an island castaway. 2 decades on, the 75-year-old has recently lost his pet dog named Polly, which was his best and only friend on the island for so many years. Number 2. Brendan Grimshaw. Grimshaw, originally from Yorkshire, England, was a real-life Robinson Crusoe. This 86-year-old man bought a remote island called Moyen in the Indian Ocean for £10,000 50 years ago in his late 30s. Once believed to be a hideaway for pirates, the rumour has it that pirates buried $45 million in treasure on the island. Grimshaw said he has tried to locate it multiple times, but has thus far been unsuccessful in all his attempts. Over the intervening years, Grimshaw planted 16,000 trees by hand, including 700 mahogany trees that have grown to reach 60 to 70 feet in height, and also constructed some of 5 kilometers of natural paths. With his 40-year-old long labour of love, he completely transformed the island. He died peacefully in 2012. Grimshaw left 120 giant tortoises, 500 turtle doves, and various bird species that were native to the island. Grimshaw also refused an offer of $50 million to sell the island, saying he did not want the island to become a holiday destination for millionaires, but rather a national park for everyone to enjoy. And number 1, Tom Leppard. The second to none on our list is the human leopard, the most isolated hermit who holds the Guinness World Record for the world's most tattooed man, and later was recognized as the most tattooed senior citizen. Known for his extensive body modification, his skin was entirely covered with leopard-like coloured pattern, and ironically, Tom has no inspiration whatsoever from actual leopards. The only reason he chose this pattern was that it was easy for tattoo artists to do such a pattern on a grand scale. After 28 years of military service, Tom Leopard moved to a remote derelict bothy on the Isle of Skye and lived there for 20 years until 2008 without any amenities. The small hut he built on Skye was constructed using stones and had a roof of plastic sheets. He would come out of his house only once a week to receive his pension and stock up on food, and then continue living in isolation. He died in 2016, saying goodbye to his blameless existence at the age of 80. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please let me know by clicking the like button. Do share, write a comment, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch up my next video.